Hi everyone, this is Old Emo Dave, here for the first ever TBR Podcast. So what is the TBR Podcast? This is a tennis podcast from me, Old Emo Dave, the tennis fan, wanting to round up each week how everything's getting on the ATP, the WTA Tour, dropping down to the Challenger and ITF events sometimes, depending on how busy the weeks are, looking at each event and the top 3 seeds, how they got on, and the top 3 shocks, and analysing where we'll be going with them in the weeks to come. This being week 1, a lot of action going on, so without further ado, let's get into the ATP events. The ATP in Qatar is usually one of those events that could be really well attended, or depending on injuries and exhibitions, could be left a little bit flat. This one may not have had Murray, Federer, Nadal or Djokovic, but we had a reasonable turnout. The top 3 seeds being number 3 Thomas Berdych, number 2 after his form in this end of season Paolo Carreño Busta, and number 1 Dominic Thiem. The seeds didn't fall out that well. And ironically in Qatar, these shocks were actually the performance of our top seeds. The top shock, but also where the number 3 seed ended up, was Jan-Lennard Struff beating Thomas Berdych in the round of 32. He got taken down 6-4, 1-6, 7-6, which would have netted you an average of 3.25 betting ratio, which would have been a 2-to-1 return on your money. Paolo Busta fell in a bit more of an even match. He fell in 3 sets to Bora Konnick. This, not so much of a surprise, because actually Bora Konnick has certainly got rising star potential back in him since he had his injury, so does rank up there quite highly. The number 1 seed, Dominic Thiem, did himself quite justice, breezing through all his rounds, unfortunately having to bow out in the semis with a walkover, which led to Gael Monfils going on and winning the final. We really hope Dominic will be in a good stead for the Australian Open, because he looked quite good this week, playing well, coming through quite unscathed, and personally I'd like to see a really good run from him in Australia. We have mentioned one of the shocks already, however, what were the other 2? Well, as it is an early season, you do see some qualifiers picking it up and making their way through. Miraz Basic was one of the guys who really impressed here. He got through as round of 32 against Gualo Garcia Lopez, which was a real good result. Then he also continued in the round of 16, beating the other Lopez Felicio, who was the number 8 seed. He finally fell, so quite surprisingly in the quarterfinals to Guido Pelley, which would have been the more likely of the opponents he could have beaten in the quarterfinal. However, for the guy from Bosnia, this was a fantastic run for the start of the year. Our other big result, Andrei Rublev making good on his potential and actually reaching the final of this event. He got himself through round of 32, in which he won the first set 6-1, but a Cedric Steeb who put in a lot of miles towards the end of last year, retiring out after a 6-1 run over in the first set. And then coming through, taking his round of 16 against Verdasco in 3. A bit of a shaky game, but Verdasco always gives a good fight. Bora Konnick then fell to him in the quarterfinal, 6-3, 7-5. He then came up against a bit of a tired Pele in the semi-finals, but fair play got taken to 3 sets, falling then to Gael Monfils, who's really hungry for a title in the final.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, ATP Chennai was the other event on the card this week, outside of Australia, which meant another bit of a spread as far as the seeds were concerned. This, in a real hot climate and in an emerging climate for tennis, was an interesting tournament, but how did the top 3 seeds get on? Number 1, Marian Cilic, did well. He came through some difficult early matches, which leading him through into the semi-finals, where he looked like he was cruising against Gilles Simon. After winning the first set 6-1, he actually went on to lose the second set 6-3 and 6-2. Almost like he had his eye on the prize. He was real surprised that Simon had that fight in him to come back and take the victory. Because the odds of 3.4 would have netted you big money on Simon, especially if you'd have got in after the second set. You'd have probably got somewhere in the region of tens based on the fact that he lost 6-1. This guy had an absolute tear. Shown by the result of our second seed, Kerr Anderson, he made it all the way to the final. He got through with very little difficulty. He did lose the odd tiebreak along the way in the quarterfinals to Kukushkin, but overall, he was the man this week. He did lose the final, but again, as we'll round up at the end here, Simon was absolutely on fire. Third seed Bautista Agut, round of 16, that's where he fell. Now, you'd probably think, oh, at least he won a match, but actually, no, this was the first match he played all week. Who did he lose to? Surprise, he lost to Gilles Simon. He lost in 2 sets, quite close 2 sets, but actually takes Simon's record against Bautista Agut to 5-1. So this guy has his number. Looking at this tournament, there is only one name we need to talk about: Gilles Simon. The man had an absolute stormer of a week. The only game which would have probably been considered an easy game for him would have been against Ten Sandgren in the first round. He came through that, but he had to face Bautista Agut, the number 3 seed, in the round of 16. He had to then go up against a qualifier, a good qualifier, in Ricardo O.J. Lara, who's another one of our surprise picks this week in the quarterfinal, to then come up against the Cilic in the semis and then Anderson in the final. If you had your faith in the little French genius this week, you would have made bank. He was on fire. As a tournament, there's a couple of other good results you could have found out. Like as mentioned, Ricardo Lara, he came through a couple of rounds. He beat Vesali in the first round, which was a good result. And then an up-and-coming Ilya Ivanska in the second round. I quite like the Belarusian, but he came unstuck. And good results really all round for Mr. Lara. And maybe a man we're going to be focusing on when we start to look at the challenges in the coming weeks. Outside of that, I really was pulling on what would be my third shock. There was pretty much the status quo as we went through. No major shocks to report, but I wanted to highlight the fact that Ramkuran Ramatharan on home soil got himself through into the round of 16. He did beat Roberto Baez in the first round, and then did come unstuck, hitting Maran Cilic in the round of 16. This guy is improving. I don't really know where the cap is as far as Indian tennis at the moment, but he is definitely a force to be reckoned with on the Challenger circuit. The final ATP Men's Main Tour event this week was held over in Brisbane. The one which usually and historically would have had by far and away the strongest field was probably on a par with all 3 tournaments as far as skill cap is concerned. How did the top 3 seeds get on? Let's run them down 1 through 3. Grigor Dimitrov had a bit of a rocky tournament, but did hold true as far as the seeding is concerned and reached the semi-finals. We did then have Andy Murray, though, who was the number 2 seed, actually withdraw before the event, really hoping that he's going to be ready in time as far as the actual Australian Open is concerned. The big shout out, though, does go to the number 3 seed, Nick Kyrgios, in his own backyard, overperforming as expected and taking this tournament down. He was a man who actually took Grigor down in the semi-finals, which really and truly probably cemented him the win. It was going to be a toss-up of 2 unseeded players in the final from the other semi-final. So, fair play to him. He earned this title, making his run. A real good showing from the seeds, actually, in this one. Other than Grigor having a bit of a hiccup in the earlier rounds, they pretty much lived up to their billing. As far as the other 3 results of notable mention, shocks, yes. Are these guys capable? Most definitely. Running down from the top, has to obviously be talked about Ryan Harrison, a man who came in right at the pinnacle of what was expected in American tennis, fell away real considerably and has been lingering outside of the top 100 with a bit of a resurgence last year, hit the final this year after a steady string of results, not really taking down massive names along the way, but getting there more than less. He himself came up against our other big notable result, Alex de Minaur, the Australian up-and-coming wildcard, who also got to the semi-finals. He took out some names along the way, but this guy has got Leighton Hewitt as a coach, and if anything as a person to watch, he will be the man to watch. Now, we're not necessarily saying on the main tour this year, but I reckon this guy is going to be taking a few challenger tours down, and definitely when we get to the Australian Open next week, be a fan favourite to look at. As far as our third result, there was a lot of even across the board matchups. You had seeds getting beaten, but beaten by guys who were either just on the fall or just on the rise. Just to be patriotic, my third pick is going to go with Kyle Edmund. He had a great tournament. He ran Dimitrov really, really close in the quarterfinals. He took the second set on a tie break. Only one break in the final set. Two actually lose. He's now 2-0 against the man, but he really looked good. And we've got to all understand that Murray is no longer really the only guy in British tennis. We really need Kyle to come through and to be challenging him for his title if we really want to see this game progress beyond the Murray era. The only other real big shout out I just want to give is John Millman. As far as Dimitrov, he gave him a super good run in the round of 16. He took the first set and actually had match point on the Dimitrov serve in the tiebreak on the second. Bit of a heartbreaker, because that would have been a good win for anyone who had cash behind him. But in fairness, that was a great first week on the ATP. We were missing some of the top guys. A couple were playing the Hoffman Cup, but really we started to see who's pinning their flag to being a real threat in the early season. Let's move over to the WTA. Before we continue the podcast, please go and visit our sponsor, ultimatepoker.com. They are giving you $10 free cash in your new account when you sign up. Either a link below the stream here on Twitch, or on YouTube, it'll be in the comments, or on Facebook, you can check out our page. Thanks for that, guys, and we'll get on with the podcast. So over to the WTA. In the Shenzhen over in China, we had a real big event which led to not so many shocks. Top 3 seeds to start off with. Starting at 3, Shai Zhang. Number 3, debatably because she's on home soil and not many people look to travel here. Had a good round of 32, but in round of 16 lost to an informed Zarina Diaz, who is looking to represent for the Kazakhs. Number 2, not only being the result of the number 2, but one of our big losses of the week is Jelena Ostapenko. Now, I got a lot of love for Jelena on both sides of the coin. On her, when she was coming up, she was always one you could look at to get a potential upset. Unfortunately, she's flipped the coin. She's now in the big leagues, and she's the one where you can potentially see the upset. In this particular event, she was out in the round of 32. Not that Pliskova was not someone who could beat her on her day, but she shouldn't have lost her so easy 6-1, 6-4. The number 1 seed, Simona Halep, she took this event down with relative ease. She came through her first round with not dropping a set. She dropped a set in the round to 16, but other than that, she seemed quite unscathed until the final. You had Katerina Siniakova, who was actually ranked number 6 this tournament, get to the final, obviously finding herself against Simona Halep, but she did take out Marina Sharapova along the way. So, a couple of questions. Is Katerina Siniakova finally actually going to represent some of the expectation? And is this a return to form for Marina Sharapova? Or is she still now looking like she's going to return herself to more of a top 20 player than someone who's going to be challenging for the finals at all? That's yet to be seen, and we'll have to see what happens in Australia. The tournament in Brisbane for the women was plagued with injuries. The number 1 seed, Garbin Muguruza, she had to retire with muscle cramps. She was in excruciating pain. If anyone saw it live, you could see why she couldn't carry on. But for sports bettors around the place, they must have been absolutely incensed if they had money on the number 1 seed. Looking at the number 2 seed and the number 3 seed, semi-final loss of Caroline Pliskova. She played well. She actually lost to the final winner, Elena Svitolina, the 3rd seed. She looks like she's really carrying on some good form and is going to be a real force to be reckoned with in Australia. Looking at our shocks and other notables, Caroline Garcia was one of the other injuries. Her back injury reoccurrence means that coming into Australia, we don't even know if she's actually going to be there. She won't play a tournament now before the Australian series, so it's still 50-50, and she might be a real good bet to lose in the first or second round if she's up against a real high number. 2 women who are back on the rise, however, are Kai Kanepi and Alexandra Sashenlitz, who played really well in this tournament. Kai Kanepi pushed Karolina Pliskova really close in her round of 8, but then you also had a finalist, Alexandra Sasnovich. She was real disappointed in losing 6-3, 6-1 in the final. However, to get there, she looked great. She played against some real high-class opposition who also played great against her, but she managed to clutch her way through. Someone to watch coming into the next few weeks. The other tournament on the slate this week was the WTA event in Auckland. This, one of the smaller tournaments, went pretty much on par. We had Cher Sue beating the 3rd seed Barbara Strakova in the quarterfinal. But apart from that, the final was taking place against the number 1 and the number 2 seed. It was actually Judy Goretz who came across Caroline Wozniacki in the end. A steady 6-4, 7-6 match, but in reality, the game was really close. Both looking really good going into the Australian swing. The thing we'd have to look at for the other 2 results is some really good performances from American wildcards. Sasha Vickery and Sophie Kenin, both reaching the semi-finals and the quarter-finals respectively. We'll have to say these guys will be looking to pick up a couple of rounds in the upcoming major events. We're going to round up the Challenger events now, and there was 3 this week. The first being in Noumea. The journeyman American, Noah Rubin, came up with the title, but there's also a notable appearance from Taylor Fritz. As a 2nd seed, he also reached the final. Surprisingly, though, the big result was the young Hungarian Zomba Piros beat Julian Benetton in the first round. If you'd have had money on the young Hungarian, and you'd have been surprised if you did, you would have come out with a 6.25 bet. What a good result for you. Moving over to Playford, the top 3 seeds all fell in the first round. This was actually more of a I'm just getting used to the new season event, I think, as a lot of people fell out and was eventually actually won by Jason Kubler, the qualifier in the final, with a very, very good run of the young Canadian Braden Shore. Now over in Bangkok, you had quite a strong field, as there's also a secondary event this week. It was actually won by Marcel Granollers, who's down in the challenges at the moment because he's been more dominant in the double circuit over the last few years. This tournament felt like his the whole way, and he came through in the final against qualifier Mats Marangig, who'd actually done really well, and is really going to be a force on the challenger circuit this year after coming back from injury during the middle of the last year. Now, let's go on and preview week 2. Started in Sydney for our upcoming events, we have not got a very stacked field. Your 1, 2, 3 in the seedings are Ramos Valones, Giles Muller and Diego Schwartzman. Over the water in Auckland, it's a little bit better. 1, 2, 3 is Jack Sock, Del Potro and Sam Querrey. As far as these matches, so far with the ones published, I'd be going with Andrei Rublev to make a first round win against Tsitsipas. He is a 2.20 underdog, and for considering his form, I would be giving him a shot. With the women, they're in Hobart this week, and that's probably one of the weaker tournaments. Shay Zhang, Elise Mertens, and Serena Surster, they're the 1, 2, 3 in the seed, but the real women strength is over in Sydney. As far as the seeds go, Garbin Muguruza could still potentially play as the moment she's got a bye into the second round, but I'd likely expect a pull out there. Venus Williams has got to be the favourite due to the fact that Jelena Ostapenko at the time of recording has already lost her first round match. It's not the only shock and won't be the last shock this tournament. We've already seen Kristina Mladenovic already losing the first round to the wild card from Australia, Ella Perez, as everyone is gearing up for the major in a couple of weeks. There is 2 challenger events on the men's side, one in Canberra and another in Bangkok. You'd expect the Canberra one to be once again dominated by the Australians who don't travel as much like Jason Kubler, and in Bangkok I would be very surprised if you don't see at least a finals appearance once again of Marcel Granollers.
15-40.
Thanks for that, everyone. This has been the first TBR podcast. Hope you've enjoyed. We're going to wrap things up now, but through the week we may post more content. So like, comment, subscribe. Any links for anything mentioned in the show, especially our sponsor, is in the description. But now, for the podcast, let's game, set and match.